Hello, welcome to British Literature Week 3. So we'll just jump right in. This video is intended to be watched before you take the quiz, so if you're watching it after, oh no. This will hopefully give you some tools so you can work with with the book and with the questions that I'm giving you with a little bit of foreknowledge. So today we're going to talk a lot about symbols and allegory. Two great things, and definitely, I would say, the heartbeat of this entire book. Before we do that, English, so hard. Before we do that, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the book so far. I'm really going to speed through the first part, and I'll spend a little bit more time talking about your reading for this last week, which was chapters 6 through 9, so you should be all the way through chapter 9. All right, so first part of the book, basically the boys land on an island. They have all these conflicts with the fire. Ralph and Jack, they're having some tension. Jack wants to hunt pigs. Ralph wants to protect this fire. Piggy and Jack really don't get along. Jack really hates him. We meet this guy Simon. He seems like a pretty decent dude. And everyone is freaking out because they think there's a beast. So right into chapter 6, we get this sign from the adult world where essentially what happens, a parachutist falls down from the sky and lands on the mountain. Sam and Eric, those twins, they are watching over the fire, and they wake up, they see the parachutist, they freak out, and they run down the mountain, and they tell the boys, and everyone's kind of freaked out. Piggy's still like, no, there's definitely not a beast. But basically everyone goes hunting. Jack convinces them all, we're going to go beast hunting. So then Jack, he takes the lead, and they find a fort, and Jack really is super into this fort. Ralph is like, come on, dude, we really got to go to this mountain. They have a bit of a power struggle, but Ralph wins out, and they go to the mountain. When they make it to the mountain, it's nighttime because they dawdled for so long. So the only people that are left are Jack, Ralph, and Roger. So they climb the mountain. They think that they see the beast because the wind blows and the parachutist kind of flicks its head. They run down. They get really scared. They assemble everyone. Jack overtly tries to overthrow Ralph. It doesn't really seem like it's working. But slowly the boys start leaving Ralph's group. So Ralph is there on the beach with Piggy, and they're trying to rebuild from the ashes. They've decided they're just going to have their fire down at the beach instead of on the mountain. And so then all of a sudden we have 3 separate stories that kind of break out. So this is where we actually see what our omniscient or all-knowing narrator is capable of. So we're split. We're with Ralph and Piggy on the beach. We're with Simon in the forest. And we're with Jack and his group of hunters that are slowly forming into some sort of crazy savage tribe. And so basically, Ralph and Piggy, we'll start with Jack and his tribe. So Jack and his tribe, they break off, and Jack's like, dude, let's just go kill a pig because, it's Jack. That's what he does. So they go hunting. They stumble upon a family of pigs. It's a mom and a bunch of little babies, and Jack's like, yes, let's kill this mom. And it results in a really disturbing scene, which you will hopefully look at for the quiz and make some comments on. And so they kill that pig, and then they sharpen a stick at both ends, and they impale her head, and they take the pig back on the beach with Ralph and Piggy. Jack's tribe comes, and they steal fire because they need to cook their pig somehow, and then they basically just beckon everyone to come and have the pig with them. Ralph, for a moment, forgets why they even need fire, and it seems to him that the other boys are having way more fun. But then Piggy reminds him, we need fire for rescue. Then we switch back to Simon, who is just meditating quietly in the forest, but all of a sudden, tone turns super ominous. So Simon kind of is in a delusional state. We think maybe he could be dehydrated or something. There's actually some word choices that Golding makes that it could be that Simon has some sort of fainting condition or a tendency to have like seizures or something like that. So something weird is happening with Simon, but he's used to it. Weird things happen to him. So he is in the forest, and all of a sudden he climbs out of his little hidey hole, and he is met face to face with the impaled pig's head, and he starts talking to it. And the pig's head says a couple of really disturbing things to him. Simon actually faints by the end of that conversation, and he wakes up in chapter 9 with a bloody nose, and he decides that he's going to go to the mountain and he's going to face the beast alone. So Simon starts slowly making his way up the mountain. When he finally gets there, he sees that it's just the parachutist, and so he starts running down to tell the boys this great news. In fact, there is no beast, it's just a man. There's some good imagery there that really leans into Golding's theme. So back on the beach, the boys are having a party. They're roasting the pig. Ralph and Piggy, they come and they start eating. But then a storm comes and it gets dark and creepy. And Piggy starts thinking like, maybe we should leave, Ralph. Ralph is like, yeah, maybe you're right. But then all of a sudden the boys start going crazy. They're singing, they're dancing, they're reenacting this pig's death. And as that's happening, Simon stumbles into their midst. He's dehydrated, he's covered in blood, and he's yelling about a man on the mountain. What do the boys do? They attack. They attack in a way that is really vicious. The scene ends, that chapter ends with Simon's body being dragged out to sea and the parachutists being blown out into the ocean as well. So it ends with basically all traces of that evil erased, and the boys will have to deal with that in the next chapter, but we'll move on from there. All right, let's get down to it. So we're talking about symbolism in Lord of the Flies. What is symbolism, you might ask, or what is a symbol? Well, it's a physical object that represents a particular idea. So in Lord of the Flies, pretty much everything is a symbol, or you could somehow relate it to that, but we'll start with the most important. So the first one would be fire. Fire represents rescue and safety to the boys. It's that connection to civilization. It's their hope that maybe somehow they could go back to normal. That's not the only thing that fire represents, though. Fire also represents to them a tool for death and destruction. This is seen when, for example, the whole hill catches on fire and the little boy goes missing. So the second thing would be these pigs. The pigs that are on the island, they're the object of obsession for most of those boys. In particular, Jack. He is constantly chasing them. And out of those pigs, we have the Lord of the Flies, which is this really nicely drawn picture that I've just done for you of a pig on a stick. So Lord of the Flies, made out of these pigs, represents kind of the evil inside man. So this thing that has been destroyed and tarnished by Jack becomes a symbol for man's evil itself. Next, we have the glasses. So these are Piggy's glasses that Jack snatches and eventually breaks. So these represent technology and higher knowledge. So basically, the special power that Piggy almost has over the boys. He has things that they don't have. And then last of all, we have the conch. So this is a shell that definitely represents the law, order, rules, but most importantly, democracy. So it's this thing that gives the voice to all the boys. Any boy that holds it, he's allowed to speak. Moving on to our characters. So like I said, literally everything could be a symbol in this story. It's an allegory, so everything is related somehow to a mega story that is going on underneath. So we have Ralph, we have Simon, we have Jack, and we have Piggy. So Ralph, he represents sense, he represents order, and he represents leadership. So these are not just characteristics that Ralph has, but they are actually the base of his character. Simon, he represents goodness. He represents morality. He represents kindness. And again, these aren't just their characteristics. These are one-sided characters in the sense that they really truly embody these in a way that a normal human doesn't. So, for instance, Jack represents savagery, and he represents violence. Most people have a balance, like they could be good and they could be savage, like they're complex. We're complex human beings, but that's not the case in this story. Piggy, he represents wisdom, and he represents order and insight. Again, if you wanted to like draw a line down the middle, you would put probably Jack on one side and the other boys on the other. Okay, so let's look broadly at allegories as a whole. So like I mentioned before, this is like a shape-shifting allegory. So all the characters, all the objects, you could potentially analyze them through a couple of different fields. Okay, so let's talk about what an allegory is. So on top, I have a story about a guy killing a pig, and underneath is the real meaning of the story. So this represents a man's relentless pursuit, which I misspelled, so what would this class be if I wasn't misspelling something? Of resources, money, and oil, etc. So this is what the author is really trying to get across, what he really cares about conveying, and that's exactly what William Golding is doing here. So like I said, this shape-shifting allegory can be read through just a bunch of different frames, depending on what you want to pull out of it. So you could look at it from a psychological frame, a social, moral frame, a religious frame, a political frame. So the psychological frame will have you looking at what internally is happening in one person. The social frame would be asking the question, what does this mean for like society as a whole? The religious frame would be looking at basically moral structure, in the way that we actually like regiment it within society. What is the meaning of the way that we kind of function? Why is good good? Why is bad bad? And specifically, this you could read it from a biblical perspective. So it's a very specific religious reading. And then last but not least, you could read it from a political frame. This political frame probably most significantly would relate to the Cold War, because that was the life that Golding was living in. So all of these things are connected to Golding's main idea. He was asking, or trying to come up to some conclusions, at the very least, about human nature as a whole. You could look at it on small facets of it, or you could look at it really broadly. So we're going to come back to this picture. We're going to look at this as a political allegory. So if we're trying to read this as, instead of it being an island of boys, but instead it's the world. What does Ralph represent if we're looking at this from like a political point of view? Well, Ralph would be a democratic leader, someone who gives a voice to all the people. Simon might be the church, potentially, or just faith in general, kind of the common morality that people have. Jack, well, he would be an authoritarian leader, someone who holds power and kind of wields it for maybe his own use. He would be a dictator. If we're looking at this as a giant political system, Piggy would probably represent the intellects or the thinkers, the ones that kind of question authority. And that's part of the reason that Jack has such a big problem with Piggy is Piggy's asking questions and thinking things that bug Jack. They're at odds with each other. Okay, we also have this group of characters called the little uns, the little kids that kind of need governing or watching. So these would, in a political allegory, probably represent the common people. And on top of this frame, you could actually lay the physical symbols, such as the conch and the fire. So for instance, here the conch would represent this mechanism for democracy taking place. It's the way that people are allowed to speak. It's the voting. It's the free speech. Jack, on the other hand, he has his fear, and he has his tribe, his army that he uses to control people. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, and homework is on the drive. Have a great week. Bye, guys.